Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. I wanted to give you a little bit of information about Conidium. My name is Meredith Oakes. I'm Global Marketing Manager here, and we have been 100% focused on sales performance management as a consultancy. We're a third-party advocate, and we have more than 12 years of experience with industry veterans. We're based in Houston, but we have more than 50 consultants across North America and Central America. And we partner with companies on a broad array of high-value ROI-driving initiatives across the SPM lifecycle. We have experience with all of the leading incentive compensation management and sales performance management solutions. And our industry experience includes insurance, financial services, banking, retail, telco, healthcare, and pharmaceuticals. A little bit about our services. We offer end-to-end SPM services, so everything from vendor selection, solution strategy, implementation and upgrade, and managed services. And with that, I'll turn it over to our presenters today, Elliot Scott and Jason Kearns.
Thank you. Hello. Yes, I'm Elliot Scott, and thanks for joining. And welcome to 5 sales incentive plan design features that wreak havoc with automation. I'm Elliot Scott, and I'm a sales incentive compensation plan designer, design consultant with about 17-plus years experience designing comp plans across industries, as well as here in the United States and around the world. And joining me today is Jason Kearns, who's the head of the implementation practice at Conidium and a champion sales compensation system integrator, and knows a great deal about administration. Working with Jason over the years, I've come to realize that there are a lot of nifty incentive plan design features that I can put in that cause him and other people involved in SPM integration and administration a lot of headaches, and he's been kind enough to point that out to me. So we're teaming up to show you some things that go wrong and why they go wrong with certain incentive plan design features. Okay, so what are the hallmarks of an effective sales incentive plan? Well, it has to be aligned with the business objectives, of course. And it has to be aligned with the sales role's responsibility. So there has to be line of sight between the sales representative and the results and the behaviors and the results. And of course, those results have to be objectively measurable. And then finally, it has to be simple and easy to understand. If I don't understand my compensation plan, it's not driving behavior. But there's another thing. An effective sales compensation plan can be automated. And now, it may be that no vendor of sales compensation plan software is going to tell you, well, we really can't automate your plans. So it's really not can be automated, but can be automated without losing your mind or without blowing your budget.
So what causes automation breakdown? Well, it's the design of the plans themselves, relying on data that doesn't exist with the unstated assumption that I'm sure we can get that data when there's no certainty at all, really, relying on multiple data feeds that can't be seamlessly integrated, and then plans that require a lot of adjustments and recalculations. So we've identified 5 of these design features that have that cause a lot of this trouble, and each of them in one way or another has, those core problems mentioned above as part of them. So our first so you may want to avoid them. Our first problem feature is increased incentives for multi-product sales, bundles. Well, there's a better bundle right there. And I think it's a great idea. It drives customer penetration, it increases revenue, it decreases customer churn. The more products, the stickier the customer. It helps launch new products. It promotes solution selling, and undoubtedly it's going to be aligned very well with the strategy. So you're probably familiar with the idea, but if you're not, here's how it works. The reward for the bundled sale is worth more than the sum of the rewards for the separate parts. So if you sell the same amount but you don't glue them all together, then you're going to earn less, than if they're glued all together, should we say. So From my perspective as a designer, it's a lovely, elegant design feature, and who could possibly take issue with it? Well, Jason apparently. So what's the problem, Jason?
Well, Elliot, it is normally a good business idea, and I wouldn't say it's always a problem. The issue comes when the data doesn't support it. One of the core issues that you spoke of earlier. And where we see this most often is a lot of times when companies want to do some cross-selling, it's usually because they've acquired a new product, possibly they've acquired a company, and they want their sales rep to not only sell their core product, something they've been selling for years, but they also want to cross over and delve into these new product set and increase customer penetration. The issues come about when the systems don't support it. When these different products are sold and entered and provisioned in different systems, and there's a different process for getting those other products online or invoiced. And so what happens is the data has to be linked together in order to properly measure when these bundles have been sold. There's also some real business rules that have to be worked out, once you get into the details of what constitutes a single sale. Is it I've sold you several products on the same day, the same week, the same month, within the same year? It is possible to sell a customer a product today and then have them call back tomorrow and to upsell them. So is that considered a bundle? Is that considered cross-selling? Those rules have to be worked out, and the data needs to be there to support that. What if you sold multiple products into multiple divisions in the same company? Have you defined your account to be at a corporate level, a department, division, a single location? Do you have the data to support selling multiple products across the company? Are you able to define that definitively once you get into the details? And also, as in most complex sales, there's a strong possibility there's going to be multiple reps selling to the same customer. And it goes hand in hand with selling to multiple divisions within the same company. Are you going to credit individuals for cross-sales if they're not responsible for the other products that were sold, if you had a different product expert involved? And so who gets credit? So as you can see, this can get extremely messy very quickly once you get to the details.
Okay, so what are we going to do about it? Well, the first idea is really more of a systems idea. So Jason, can you take this one here?
Well, and this goes from personal experience. I've worked with a client who had this very same issue, multiple products provisioned in multiple systems. They had different life cycles when it comes to the period of time between when a product was booked and when it was actually installed. And the way they solved this was they built a new product into their provisioning system that represented the bundle. So essentially, when in the source system, in the order entry system, instead of just entering those 4 different products that they would sell the customer, they'd enter those 4 products along with an extra code that represented the bundle. And so once that data was sent downstream to the incentive comp system, we were able to key off of that one independent bundle code in order to incentivize based on selling the bundle.
But let's just say that you've decided, you've looked at the situation and you've just decided, well, we're not sure we can get there, or it might be too much trouble than it's worth, or we're not going to get there this year. Fortunately, there are some ways to effectively reward the same, have the same effect in different ways. So, for example, a multiplier for achieving a certain level of performance on multiple product quotas. And I'm not talking about saddling the sales representative with a separate quota for each piece of the bundle, but if they're not selling any of parts of the bundle, then it's a pretty good chance that they're not selling, so let's say you've got to achieve at least 50% of your quota on each of the separate parts of the bundle. Chances are that's going to be driving that cross-selling. So let's say I'm selling, software, services, and hardware. You could have, separate quotas that you don't have to achieve 100% of, but in order to get the extra pay for the bundling incentive, you'd have to achieve a certain minimum level. or possibly if I was selling SPM integration services and design consulting. As a design consultant, I'd want to make sure the sales rep, got paid extra for selling the bundled-in design services. Another thing you can do is offer higher credit for higher margin or simply strategic products. So oftentimes the bundle is designed to tack on something that's of particular strategic importance for the company. So if you identify, let's just say you're paying on revenue possibly, or you're paying on margin, you can identify certain products as core versus strategic and credit those differently, or pay at a higher rate. And then finally, you can also say, okay, we're not going to pay for the bundling. We're not going to pay this increased incentive for the multi-product sale. But at the end of the year, we're going to go back and we're going to take a look at our customers and look at customer penetration and what is the suite of products that these customers have bought over the year or over time. And you'll be able to see which customers are penetrated more fully, and then you can pay or recognize salespeople on a separate measure. And then finally, since multi-product incentives tend to become obsolete because they tend to be driving a fairly short-term initiative, you could say, okay, we're going to accept a higher level of manual intervention and financial commitment to run something outside of the plan temporarily. So a temporary reward and recognition contest outside of the plan. So those are some ways to get at the same objectives that you might be looking to get at with increased incentives for multi-product sales. Our second design feature is payouts over time triggered by multiple events. So why is this a good idea? Well, it aligns incentive. It's usually because it aligns incentive with the uncertainty of the deal. So if it's a contract of uncertain value, so based on customer usage, if I pay all the incentive at booking based on the estimated usage, the reward may be seriously misaligned with the deal value. And I may need the sales rep involved post-sale to get the revenue from it. And if I hold part of the payment for a later date, there's less of a need for the dreaded clawback. And finally, it aligns the incentive cost with revenue recognition. A lot of finance organizations do not like to pay out a lot of sales incentive well in advance of the revenue recognized from those sales. It's a very common feature, and it's impossible to get around in many cases. And here's how it works. So you have X percentage of the incentive earned at booking, say 25% of the estimated value of the deal, another 25% at installation, and then Z%, perhaps with a true-up, as the customer is invoiced, and or pays over time. So, Jason, what are the problems with this?
Well, first off, I agree with you that this is an issue that it's kind of the age-old battle between sales and finance and HR. Sales want their compensation plan to mirror their motivational techniques and to affect behavior of their salespeople. So they want to pay people for what salespeople have control over, and that's most likely going to be bookings and other events along the pipeline of sales. On the finance and compensation side, we like to pay. There's two main tenets. First, we like to pay people based off of solid data. That's not going to change. That's certain. And number two, we like to get bang for our buck. We would prefer to pay, if finance had their druthers, they would pay off of accounts payable or invoices, or whenever the revenue is recognized, that's when they would prefer to pay salespeople. So a lot of times this becomes a negotiation, and a happy medium needs to be negotiated. And there could be, in many cases there are, some system limitations. First off, it often requires multiple systems, once again, to be linked. You have bookings, a CRM or a Salesforce type system that's used to track opportunities. You have invoices or provisioning systems on the back end where usually the data is more solid. It's more, it's kind of leading to the shipped product. However, it's well after the fact, and in many cases, or in many situations, there's a large delay between the time of a booking and time of an actual closed sale. So invoice data, and also one other issue that if you sell multiple products or you have a very complex sale going into a certain customer, usually invoices and especially payment activity is not tracked at that detail or order or product level. So you'd have a very difficult time taking, it'd be similar to you writing a check to your cable company and having your cable provider break down your payment in terms of your cable, phone, internet, HBO, all the different products you're paying for. But at that payment level, in the system and the data, that link is usually not provided. Another big issue is, like I spoke of before, invoice data, and usually anything beyond invoice data is usually locked down. It's usually recognized revenue that takes goes through a real accounting rigor in order for changes to be made to that data. Other pipeline data, bookings, and opportunities usually can change. If you're measuring salespeople based on bookings, you're taking a current snapshot. However, bookings can change. The size of the deals, the prices, who's getting credit for those things can usually change and can be pretty fluid up until the time the actual sale is closed. And another issue that we see, and this is especially true for services type sales, where you have long-term contracts that maybe are invoiced monthly. You'll have multiple invoices and multiple payments associated to a single sale. And so the more events that you have that are being paid out over time, the more complex the situation is, the more pieces of data have to be linked together, the greater possibility for error, and the more need for possible manual intervention or manual tracking.
All right. So, because it's often not advisable or politically feasible to pay either all at booking or all at cash received or revenue recognition, we have to think in terms of mitigating the problem. So, although there might be something to be said for linking pay to a large number of key events, to recognize each of those events, each of them are important, really the main benefit of the multiple events is to avoid either A, paying all up front, or B, paying nothing up front. So more events equals more complexity and smaller, less meaningful rewards at each step. This may have the added benefits if you reduce the number of steps that you're paying on. Of course, it has the added benefit of reducing the need, to link to systems. So you've got to choose those systems which can provide the most unambiguous data. So, for example, is paying on invoicing a reasonable substitute for paying on customer acceptance? If invoicing happens immediately upon customer acceptance, and then you're not really gaining much by paying on customer acceptance other than to mark that event. And then another thing you can do is you can estimate the most common outcome and pay on that. And what we mean by this is if event B almost always happens, say, 1 to 2 months after event A, then just simply release the payment for event B after 1 to 2 months. And then go back and take a look later on to see if there's a need, audit later on to see if there's a need for a true-up. That gets away from, linking to event B entirely. So another option, if you can't link booking and say invoicing, is to have two separate measures: booked revenue and invoiced revenue. So you're holding the salespeople accountable for the invoiced revenue. You're also holding them accountable for their bookings. The invoiced revenue might not be directly linked to those bookings, but they're not going to make the money if they don't bring in the revenue from the sales that they have booked or do what they need to do. And then finally, something you see occasionally, particularly in organizations or regions where they do have a hard time collecting from customers, or where cash flow is an issue, or the financing charges, is to consider a separate accounts receivable aging measure or a day sales outstanding measure unlinked to individual orders, where essentially you're looking across all of the sales of a salesperson during a period, usually a year, to say, okay, what's the weighted average days sales outstanding? How much is this is sitting out there in accounts receivable unpaid, and how old how old is that debt, and then pay or hold pay on the basis of that. So so that sort of, covers off on, payouts over time triggered by multiple events, different ways of getting around that. Another problem that Jason and I have seen recently is this idea of order-specific commission rates, and how that happens, or one way in which this happens is a plan with a ramped commission scheme where the rate increases the more you sell. Your commission rate increases the more you sell during the year. So as you get to 50% of goal, your rate goes up. If you get to 100% of goal, your rate goes up. That motivates increased sales and goal attainment. But that combined with the need or the desire to pay over time can result in this scheme that we saw where the payout for each deal happens over time based on usage or customer payment, but at the commission rate originally recorded back in the year in which it was signed. So as a result, and the contracts, if they're going on for 3-5 years and they're paid monthly, there can be a lot of separate rates for each deal that have to be stored and used over time. So, in this case, there were literally thousands of separate commission rates that had to be called up to calculate the payment on customer payments that came in for usage on the contracts that were signed by the sales representative. So, Jason, you're intimate with this problem. Take us through it, if you would.
Sure. And so, just to point out, there's plenty of industries where it makes perfect sense to calculate rates based on a specific order. A lot of the insurance type plans come to mind where all the information you need to calculate commission for a single sale is on that order, and it makes all of your tiering is relegated to that order. So for example, if they achieve a certain level within that specific sale, they can get a higher rate. What this issue is addressing is really there's two main causes to it. One is tiering of rates based on the aggregate sales. So as Elliot stated, where taking your performance, as it were, for the quarter or the year, and using that to determine a rate for a specific sale when it comes in. And then what compounds the issue is where that rate is then used in future events. So going back to our second problem child, there's future events that are getting paid based on the rate that's being determined when the booking comes in, and that booking rate is determined based on an aggregate of sales for that year. So just talking about it makes it sound complex, and it is. The issue can get out of hand, and so there's a lot of there's a few main reasons for that. One is there is the potential that you have to go back and store many rates, and Elliot pointed out the specific example that we've seen recently where there's literally thousands of rates being potentially stored based on all the various orders coming in. Essentially, the way they were processing was, and as the orders came in, they would sort them every day by customer number or some other sequencing, and where as the orders were processed, a rate was basically tagged onto that order, and then the payouts didn't actually come till later in the year, several months later, when the usage was actually done. So a lot of complication comes out because of that. One is it's just a really complex problem to solve. Two, you're creating a real level of confusion. Well, you're opening yourself up to trying to be too perfect. And you have bookings come in, you have split orders, you have rebuilding of orders, you have adjustments, you have a lot of different things that can happen to your booking information that can affect retroactively how those orders would have been calculated, how the rates would have been calculated. And so when you implement this type of mechanism in your plan, you open yourself up to really being at the mercy of the perfection that you're trying to achieve. Now you're left with the case of having to go back in time, adjust a single order that then causes a cascading effect for all orders that happen after that point in time, and trying to go back and recreate and rebuild history and recalculate all the orders for all the rates for all the orders that came about between that time and now. adding in all the different possibilities for splitting, and really where the split orders comes into play is what if you have multiple people getting credit for that order that are potentially on 2 different rate schedules. So the complexity can just basically grow exponentially as you start to add really normal plan mechanics. When you apply that to this situation, really the opportunity for error gets enormous. And then not from, stepping away from really the systems issue here and how complex it is and how hard it is to administer, we've also seen that really from a salesperson's perspective, this really creates what I would consider to be a problem. You're essentially introducing a situation where 2 sales that come in that are identical can be paid different rates, really based arbitrarily in a lot of salespeople's mind based on when they were submitted. So, if somebody is near crossing a tier and they have a big sale, in their back pocket ready to submit, there's a pretty good chance the salesperson is going to wait because in their mind, it's going to be worth more to them to wait until they cross that tier before submitting that sale. And it's a situation where, in reality, when you go back and run the numbers, it doesn't make there's no financial impact for submitting a sale, later rather than sooner. However, from a salesperson point of view, when they look and they see the rates on their reports, and they want their bigger sales to get paid at a different rate. However, we know that it's having salespeople hold sales in their back pocket and basically try to game the system and decide how much they want to get paid for that is behavior that we don't want to encourage. And this type of plan design, unfortunately, does encourage that type of behavior. And so, Elliot, you probably have some ways to solve this problem and make it less complex and less troublesome.
Yeah, fortunately, there actually are a lot of alternatives, and one we mentioned before is just to release the payment over time, which works best when there's little uncertainty of the value of the deal. Then you can also pay the variable rate for 1 year only. So they'll get the higher differentiated rate for 1 year, but then the commissions that they're receiving in the out years of the contract are all at a consistent rate, which reduces the amount of data to store and access, and also reduces the cognitive dissonance when the rep receives checks for very different amounts for basically identical customer usage of the product. Another thing you can do is pay the commission on all sales based upon current year performance. After all, you're really, sales comp is primarily about driving focus on the current year, so you could pay the past sales on the current year performance as opposed to the performance in the year in which the sale happened. Another thing is simply to reduce the number of possible rates. Of course, the more different rates, in the example that Jason and I are familiar with, they had quite a number of ramps in the commission curve, and the fewer ramps you have, the fewer separate rates you're going to have, the less complexity there's going to be. So perhaps one rate to target, one above, and possibly a decelerated rate above that. Finally, or not finally, but you can also pay a flat commission rate. That's the easiest thing of all. If everybody knows, I'm going to be getting 5%, I'm going to be getting 3%, that's, solid gold line of sight. But then you can, in order to encourage goal attainment, pay a separate goal attainment bonus to drive in-year productivity. And then finally, something that's really very close to what was originally started with this scheme of calculating the rate, at the time of sale and then paying it out over time. Instead of calculating a separate rate for each sale, create a blended rate for each month or time period. You could even do it for all the sales that happened in that year, and so that it would apply to. So in order to look up the commission rate for the sale, you simply have to look to the appropriate time period, and it reduces the number of rates as well. So our fourth plan design feature that causes a lot of problems is excessive quota adjustment, and this really goes to excessive adjustment. You can adjust quotas, you can adjust payment, there's any manner of different adjustments, often having to do with territories changing and the like. So why is this a good idea? Well, quotas are designed to be fair. If we didn't, they're an attempt to impose fairness and a level playing field upon the sales force, even if they're always to a certain degree imperfect. So when something happens that renders a quota less fair, some external event, it seems conceptually appropriate to make an adjustment. So an account moves to somebody else's territory, goes out of business, merges with another company, the territory changes, a product is perhaps out of stock that was going to represent a certain percentage of sales. Salespeople, come and go, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure many of the people on the call are familiar with hundreds, possibly, of reasons, potential reasons to make adjustments to quotas and payouts. But conceptually, let's be fair, right? So, Jason, what's the problem?
Well, first off, we would never discourage companies from trying to be fair with their quotas and doing adjustments when they make sense. But what we do advise is that every company out there become fully aware of the implications of the type of adjustments that they're doing. And probably the best way to illustrate the problems is to illustrate the requirements for what you need to do in order to build a system that's capable of doing accommodating these type of adjustments. And so, in order for a system to run properly, you have to define and build the requirements and the rules and define the reasons for quota adjustment, and they can't be ambiguous. These have to be reasons that are definable based on the data that you have in your system. So can you go to that level of detail and define when certain adjustments are justifiable and when they can be automated? The level of adjustment, the inputs must be defined. All the potential downstream implications of the adjustment must be mapped out. Do quota changes, for example, do quota changes also mean there should be territory changes? Do quota changes mean that management quotas need to be adjusted? Does it affect their draw status? Does it affect their bonus status? Does it affect their President's Club status? There's a lot of other implications that have to be thought about. And the response to those implications, at most companies that are doing it right, they have some sort of committee that can sit down and map those out, and it is possible. It seems like a daunting task to define all the various possible reasons for a quota adjustment, but it is possible, and I've seen it done several times. And once you define those business rules, then you go back and you decide, okay, what can be automated? What can we build in the system to make some of this easier? And it needs to be coded, and it needs to be tested. And bear in mind that while quota adjustments are generally done in the interest of fairness, obviously whenever you move quotas around, it's usually in most places a zero-sum game. So if you're taking quota away from some people, you're adding it to somebody else. That's not always the case, but whenever quotas are changed, and they change to be not in favor of somebody who's getting that change, there's going to be complaints, and so it really pays off to have the business rules really worked out ahead of time. And if the business rules are so solid that you can work these out in the system to where it's driven, let's say, for example, what I've seen in the past is a very common reason for a quota adjustment is somebody moving from one job to another. They're being transferred or they're being promoted. And that can be a data-driven event. You can have an HRMS system, such as PeopleSoft, for example, that sends you, that once that job change is made in PeopleSoft, it's passed down to your compensation system. You can build rules in your comp system to adjust that person's quota based off of that change. And you can have hard and fast business rules followed by hard and fast technical rules that enforce that change. And when you have that fully documented, and when it works to the letter as it's supposed to, then there's much less room for sales reps to complain or management to complain about what's being implemented. And then from there, what it really does is it reduces the amount of manual effort that has to be put into the adjustments to really just the exception cases. The exceptional cases where there was a typhoon in the Northeast, and so everyone's quota was adjusted. Those type of natural disaster type situations that affect a large group of people, and really those are the reasons that you want to get your committee together, and that prevents there from being kind of this one-off case by case ruling that has to happen just for what should be normal cases of quota adjustment.
Okay, so what to do about it? Although you can never entirely eliminate quota adjustments, or at least the possibility of quota adjustments. You need the objective is to contain the problem. Salespeople will individually argue long and hard for adjustments, but in the aggregate, it may not drive performance. First, you need to tightly define the actual crediting rules and circumstances, Jason went through, and this needs to be done extremely carefully because you can never be too careful, and the chances of not covering off on everything are very, very high. But it really pays off because the trouble of dealing with an ambiguous situation is, and the amount of time that's spent working through that and is usually much greater. So tight policies keep everybody happy, and they limit administration hassles. Another relatively easy thing that you can do if you have the the common sense and the political power is to simply limit the times that when adjustments can happen, which increases efficiently significantly. And then third, you can find ways to make up for quota unfairness. Without putting yourself through the hassle, of adjustment and undermining, the credibility of quotas. And so there can be discretionary funds, temporary guarantees, recognize those who overcome unfair quotas. After all, quotas, are designed to be fair, but they're always unfair. And somebody that overcomes a bad situation, through outstanding sales performance is a great person to recognize and hold up as an example. But, when all else fails, just pay a target for the period. Okay. Finally, our last problem plan design feature is mixed calendars. So why is this a good idea? Oh yeah, it isn't. It happens over time for a variety of reasons, but the main reason seems to be, well, because we've always done it that way. So Jason, what's the problem?
Well, really, there's one problem, and which maybe doesn't crop up as much. First off, all the systems that are out there can handle mixed calendars, so it's not necessarily a system issue. Where it's really a matter of cadence. There's a lot of job roles out there where it just makes fundamental sense to pay them weekly or biweekly, and there's other job roles where it makes just fundamental sense to pay monthly or quarterly. And a lot of times you're paying both those roles out of the same system. And so the tendency is to just build two different calendars and pay them, even though they're getting paid usually off the same data, because more often than not, where this mixed calendar issue comes into play is where you're dealing with, say, sales reps on the ground and then their management, where management gets paid monthly or quarterly, and the reps themselves get paid weekly or biweekly. And so this is all technically possible to do. However, what we see is a real problem with the cadence and the reporting. Just imagine a situation where a manager is really driving hard to hit their number. The end of the month is coming up. However, the end of the month happens to be on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and they're having a hard time getting their sales reps motivated to really help them hit that number that they need to hit. And the reason is because the sales reps period doesn't end until Friday or next Friday, because they're getting paid weekly or biweekly. And so what we found is just from a cadence, from keeping the management and reps all in lockstep, it really helps to not have mixed calendars, and you can have lower leaf level periods, but they need to be nested evenly within the parent periods.
Yeah, so fortunately, as Jason said, it's an easy fix. Replace the biweekly with semi-monthly and create this nested fiscal calendar. So you're defining months as having either 5 or 4 weeks, so that the end of the month is always the end of the week. Okay, so that takes us through our 5 plan design features that wreak havoc with automation. And to recap, to improve the odds of automation success, beware of increased incentives for multi-product sales. You might be able to find other ways of accomplishing the same effect. Make sure that the events triggering payouts can be clearly identified in the data, that links to the sales data. Avoid order-specific commission rates and the number of instances where those rates will be called up and used. Beware of excessive quota adjustments, and don't use mixed calendars. Well, I hope you're as excited about the intricacies and minutia of sales compensation design and administration and SPM integration as we are. And thank you so much for joining us. I'm Elliot Scott, and this was Jason Kearns, and I guess we'll take a look and see if there are any questions that were submitted.
Great. Thanks, Elliot. Thanks, Jason. At this time, if you have any questions, feel free to type them here in the questions panel, and we'll address them. And if not, we'll let everybody go. Elliot, I was wondering, what's a good way to get these conversations started so that you can make the best efforts in planning for plan design?
Yeah, that's a good point, because a lot of these things, it's really all about collaboration and making sure that you really need to have in the plan design process, the plan design meetings, you really need to have IT people involved, and not just a representative from IT to take notes and report back to somebody, but somebody that's empowered to say, I really don't think we can do that, or I don't know that if we can do that, quickly, or we can't do that, but we can do this. So with, ideally the IT people need to be invited, their opinion needs to be respected and listened to by the salespeople, HR, finance, the other people on the design team, and then also the IT people, need to get into the spirit of the design. And really, think about, well, what is it that the design is trying to drive? Because they are, after all, the ones with the best knowledge of what can and can't be done, and often come up with some of the best ideas about how to get around some of these problems. Jason, would you add to that?
Well, I would echo everything you just said, and I would say that having people on both sides trying to understand the other point of view. I mean, where we see this really becoming a problem is at organizations where IT is, where the business doesn't think IT needs to know really why they're implementing certain plan designs, and they're just saying, this is what we need, give it to me, and that's it. And then on the flip side, an IT organization that simply says, well, if you're asking for anything, we're not going to give it to you. This is what you get, and that's it. And so there has to be, just as anything else in life, we highlighted 5 design features that could be a problem. There's an infinite number of issues that could be a problem based on your situation. And it's only through a collaboration between the two where you can come to really a conclusion and something that works out. And as Elliot stated, I mean, ideas can come from both sides. For example, on that the first pitfall where we recommended using a account penetration metric as opposed to measuring individual bundled sales for paying people, I personally witnessed that collaboration at a client, and it was somebody from the IT side that said, hey, the way our data is structured, it's really difficult for us to tie together multiple sales to come up with a bundle. However, we can query from the account side and measure at any point in time our penetration into a single account. And also we can tell who owns that account. And, that was something that the business side wasn't aware that could be done, or they didn't know that was easier to request that. And there was no way they would have known that if it wasn't for that collaboration.
Great. Okay, great. Thanks to you both. For everyone attending, you will receive a copy of the presentation after the webinar today. We'll be emailing it to you, and we appreciate you all being able to join us today. Thanks and have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you.